this week, what he spoke. So Genesis chapter 30. And this is where our journey today is going to begin. Genesis chapter 30, and I'll be reading a lot of verses today. But in Genesis chapter 30, this is, it starts out with talking about Rachel gives Bilhah to Jacob. And this is the account after y'all all getting ready to get all tongue-tied now. Verse 30 says, and when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, give me children or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. And he said, am I in God's stead? Who hath withheld from me the fruit of the womb? So Jacob has worked his 14 years. Laban tricked him into marrying Leah first. Then he finally gets Rachel. They've been married all this time now, and they realize that she's barren. Rachel is feeling a certain way about it. And she's mad at Jacob. It's your fault. No, Jacob said, it's not my fault. I didn't make your womb barren. Go to the Lord about it. Don't point your fingers at me. So this is the beginning stages. They've already, like I said, been married. And he, like I said, he married Leah first. Rachel now in her anger and frustration. We know that when Jacob married Leah, Laban also gave her a handmaid. When Rachel got married, when he married Rachel as well, he gave Rachel a handmaid. Part of the job description of these handmaids was if the wife was unable to have kids, that they would have kids for her on her behalf. So Rachel realizes she's not able to have children, so she gives Bilhah, her handmaid, to Jacob to have children now. So at least she can say in some capacity that she's giving Jacob children. She's giving Jacob sons because sons were the valued commodity at the time. Finally, in verse 30, chapter 30, verse 22, starting with verse 22, Joseph is born to Rachel. So finally now, after all this time, Leah's been having children, Leah's handmaid's been having children, Rachel's handmaid's been having children, and now Rachel is finally able to have children. And Joseph is so ecstatic because Rachel is the one he loved. Rachel is the one he wanted all along. And now finally, the one that he loved, that he didn't love her any less because she wasn't having children. Leah was giving him children left and right. When the competition started, then Rachel gave him her handmaid, and then Leah didn't want to fall behind, so she gave him her handmaid. So Jacob, he's got all these children coming by these three different women, yet the one he loved, truly loved, he didn't love her any less because she wasn't giving him any children. But instead, he loved her the most anyway. So now finally Joseph shows up, and Jacob is so happy and ecstatic. He's got a son by the woman that he loves. So life is all good. He's still working for Laban. He's still working those 7 years on that he agreed to work for Rachel. Because he worked those 7 years, and when he thought he was going to get Rachel, he got Leah. And so they made that agreement. Well, if you work 7 more years, I'll give you one new one. So he had to honor the marriage week with Leah, then he got Rachel. And so that's where we find ourselves. So Laban and Jacob had their work agreement. Through that work agreement, Laban again is trying to get over on Jacob. Jacob makes his arrangement to where he's going to make himself rich and abundant off of Laban's crops off of his flocks, without robbing from Laban. So he develops his bounty. He decides it's time to leave. he goes from, he leaves Laban's camp, he returns back through all of that. Let's jump forward to chapter 37. In chapter 37, starting with verse 1, it says, "And Jacob dwelt in the land, wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan." So these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with the brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. He told them on. He did what younger brothers do. Saw him cutting up, brought back the report to his dad. Well, he was sitting out by his dad, to find out where his brothers were. Saw what they were doing. He was just doing what his dad wanted him to do. And so from that, there was a lot of animosity that it was already there. It was already there because Jacob showed Joseph so much favor because he was the one. He was that favored one because he came from Rachel. Rachel was the one that he loved. So Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah, all those other children born by them did not receive the same level of love that Joseph received. So there was that animosity. So they plot against Joseph. They sell him into captivity. We're just kind of going through, touching through the chapters here. Chapter 39 talks about Joseph's advancement. Verse 1 says, "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph. And he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of Potiphar, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian." So God had given Joseph a dream. And Joseph shared this dream with his brothers, which was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. He was already well loved. He was already one of his father's favorite. He had this nice coat that Dad had made. Dad hadn't given them anything close to this, if anything at all. So he's got on this nice coat. Now he gets this dream. He comes back telling about this dream where his dad and everybody else, they're going to be bowing down to him. I can't take any more of this. Who does this guy think he is? Oh my goodness. That now, not only are we going to be less than him, lower than him, bowing down to him, but even his father him is going to be lower than him. That's too much. We can't take it anymore. So he threw him in the pit, and the plan was to kill him. And so Reuben said, "No, we're not going to kill him." But when Reuben went away, they sold him. So he winds up in Potiphar's house. In chapter 39, Joseph goes from the pit to Potiphar's house to prison. This life that Joseph is leading, now where he has this, he's got favor of his father over all his younger brothers. He's the youngest. The youngest is usually overlooked. The youngest is usually the one last in line for inheritance. With all those other 11 brothers in that, inheritance-wise, he was really in line to get very little to nothing. But all the love and everything was coming down to Joseph. Get out. You got to go. Throw him in the pit. Sold him to the Ishmaelites. The Ishmaelites brought him into Egypt. He's bought by Potiphar. He's in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife finds him attractive. Potiphar's wife is doing what Potiphar's wife does. And she tries to seduce Joseph. Joseph is a man of integrity. Says, "I will not do this." So yes, you are. Grabs his coat and says, "Oh no, I'm not." He left the coat. So she lied on him. He ends up in prison. This whole time, Joseph has not tried to escape. Joseph has not tried to get back to the land of his fathers. He's not trying to get back to the home of his father. He's simply going, he's taking things as they come. Living the life that as it comes. I mean, he had no control over anything. He couldn't control his brothers throwing him in the pit. He couldn't control his brothers selling him to the Ishmaelites. He couldn't control the Ishmaelites bringing him to Egypt. He couldn't control Potiphar buying him. He couldn't control any of that. He couldn't control Potiphar's wife. He couldn't control the testimony that got thrown into prison. So now he's in prison. He's just, life is just treating him so badly. Treating him 180 degrees contrary to the dream that he had from the Lord. But wherever he goes, he's prospering. Because he prospered Potiphar's house. Potiphar's house, Potiphar could trust him with everything. Potiphar even trusted him with his life. Potiphar had to know he could not trust his wife like that. He had to know. How should have been? He wasn't dumb. He probably heard the rumor. He probably knew everything that was going on. But because this thing happened the way it did, he had to go with his wife's word over this servant. Okay. So Joseph ends up in prison. So he's gone from the pit to Potiphar's house to prison. Now we fast forward over to chapter 41. Pharaoh's having dreams. Joseph's been in prison, down there in prison. The cupbearer and the servant are down in there, the chef are down in there. They come to prison with him, and they have dreams. He interprets the dreams. And his dream was that basically he's going to die, and he died. The other one had the dream of you're going to be restored. He got restored. When he finds out he's going back, Joseph tells him, remember me. Tell the king about me. Tell the king about me. So Joseph, he goes up there, and this guy forgets. He forgets. Joseph is forgotten. Been lied on, imprisoned unfairly, and now this guy that he helped out interpreted his dream. Till he gets out, he's forgotten about Joseph. But God is perfect in his timing. Because when he gets out, he tells the king about it, and the king says, "Oh, you're right. You shouldn't be in prison. You shouldn't be in prison. You're set free." He's either going back to Potiphar's house, or he's going to head back to the home of his father. And he never gets lined up to get put in a position that he would eventually find himself. So God's timing is perfect. So the one who got out, and Joseph said, "Remember me," to the king, forgot about him after all this time. Pharaoh has dreams now that trouble him. Troubling dreams. And his advisors, no one can tell him what the dreams mean. But then the one who got out of prison said, wait a minute. When I was in prison, there was a guy. I know a guy that can tell you what your dreams mean. And so he calls him for such a time as this, in due season. God's always going to put us in the right place. In due season. We'll feel overlooked, we'll feel forgotten, but in due season, the right one, our name's going to come across out of the right one's mouth to the right one's ear. So Joseph is able to come up out of prison. He tells Pharaoh what his dreams mean. Dreams say, okay, you're going to have 7 years of feast, 7 years of plenty, 7 years of excessive goodness, bountifulness. But that's going to be followed by 7 years of drought. So what you need to do is put away during the years of bounty so that you can make it through the 7 years of drought. Pharaoh was so impressed. He says, you know what? We're going to do that. You're going to be in charge. You are the number 2 man in all of Egypt. So God had this purpose. God had this purpose for Joseph. But see, it just wasn't about Joseph. It wasn't just about Joseph. This was about getting Joseph's family to a certain spot. because God had purpose for the family, Joseph had to leave the family, be separated from the family, be taken non-amorously, angrily, maliciously away from his family, who thought lowly of him, except for Joseph and Rachel, obviously. But Jacob, Jacob, thank you. Except for Jacob, his father, and Rachel, his mother, who did not think badly of him. But God is using him in this entire time to get him to where he's going to save his family. Not only does he save a nation, but he preserves his family in that time. Now Genesis 47, chapter 11. Chapter 47, verse 11. This is the culmination of everything. This is the culmination of everything. They come to Egypt, they to get grain because of the famine. They went through all of these different situations, but finally they realize that Joseph is their brother, and that they can go back and tell Jacob that Joseph is alive, and they're reunited. And then here in chapter 47, verse 11, it says, "And Joseph placed his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded." Verse 12, "And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household with bread according to their families." This is what God had intended the whole time. But this is not the end of the song. This is a pretty good high point, but this is not the end of the story. This is not the end of the story. Because the generations from Adam all the way up to Abraham, God was showing himself to people. God was revealing himself to people, manifesting himself, doing things in people's lives. And now we have the expansion, if you will, of God's purpose. Because up to this point, it's been this person to this person, this person, that patriarchs, Adam and Eve, up to Noah, up to now Abraham. And now the seed of Abraham, Isaac, now to Jacob. Moving on, doing what God, carrying out God's purpose. Verse 47, Joseph, he provides for his family. So everything's now good. Everything is now good. They're set up and they're good. So they've been set up in the land. They've been set up, and he provided them with food and everything. Now let's go to chapter 50 of Exodus. Genesis. Genesis chapter 50, verse 26. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. I said 120 earlier in Sunday school, but it's 110. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So Joseph, all that time and everything, he lived to be 110 years old. God gave him a dream. He told what that dream was, and that dream, sharing that dream, put him on a path to preserve his family. Put him on a path to preserve his family. It did not look like, didn't seem like, feel like the likely path of a person with that kind of dream from God. If you look at any point at his time away from his family, he had to go away from his family in order to preserve his family. So anytime when he's in the pit, that doesn't look like a promise. In Potiphar's house, even though he's prospering, even though he's helping the household prosper, that doesn't look like the promise. Because how's he going to prosper his family? Unless he thinks, well, Potiphar's going to pay me real well, and I'll get some money, and I'll go back and help my family and do all of that. But he's not going to earn enough money to even that, because Potiphar's not that rich. He probably well paid himself being an officer in the Egyptian army. So, but even if Potiphar endows Joseph with all that he has, that's not enough So he's ready to go back and say, I have this, I'm this person, for his family to bow down before him. That's not enough. So that doesn't look like the dream coming true. For Potiphar's house, he goes to prison. Now, it really doesn't look like. Now things are really taking a turn. In his mind and heart, it could have felt like he was 180 degrees going away from the dream that God had given him. He wasn't questioning God. He wasn't doubting. He wasn't fearing. He wasn't complaining. He wasn't bemoaning his situation. He wasn't lamenting his life. He was thriving. He was blooming where he was. He was thriving in the place where he was. Because just like we say, when God has a purpose and that calling on your life and you're working that out, wherever you are is not where you're going. The pit wasn't where he was going. Potiphar's house wasn't where he was going. Prison wasn't where he was going. But all of those were necessary stops on the way. On the way to the palace. Even the palace. The palace was the place. The palace was the place where God used him to not just save a nation. See, Egypt was collateral. They were collateral. They benefited collaterally from God using Joseph to save and preserve his family. A whole nation benefited. A whole nation benefited because Joseph had to be displaced from his family. So one person removed from his family would benefit a nation. But that family that he was removed from would become a nation. So God is doing things. Even when it doesn't seem like it, when it doesn't feel like it, he's got a plan. He's always got a plan. So Genesis 50, verse 26. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. It's that day almost. But think about it. Even though Joseph is passed, we're not done. The story goes on. The account goes on. So let's now see the Exodus chapter 1. In verses 8 through 22. We're not going to read them all, but I'll just read a little bit of it. Exodus chapter 1 and verse 8. Now there rose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. So there's some generations that have passed. Because for Joseph to rise up and do the things that he did, and he died at 110 years old, so that was a long time for his legacy to be established and still be talked about. So the rest of the family, the other brothers, they're all there, growing their family outside of Egypt. He was given Pharaoh's choice land. So the family now is there, and the family is multiplying, families growing, doing what families do, becoming families, becoming bigger families. They're expanding. And so now we're to the point where a king over Egypt who knew not Joseph rose up. And he said unto his people, verse 9, Behold, the people of the children of Israel, and he's referring to them literally as the children of Israel, because of Jacob now become Israel. This is what they're known as, the children of Israel. They are many and mightier than we. The king of Egypt is looking out over his land and saying, this family, the children of Israel, is many. They're more and mightier than we are. Never mind the fact we haven't had a problem out of them. Never mind the fact that we've never gone to war with them. Never mind the fact that they've just grown in that land that they were given by the number 2 in the land when he was alive, Joseph. But he had no idea who Joseph was. He rose up and he didn't know who Joseph was. So he didn't know the significance of those people who've grown up mighty and now are more than we. So now he's afraid. Verse 10, come and let us deal wisely with them. wisely, he says. Worldly wisdom. Fear wisdom. Now come, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, so get them up out of the land. He's come up with his own scenario. He's working off of might, maybe, and could. He's never mind the fact, again, that they've been there for generations, that they've grown. Yes, they're bigger, but they've not come to war. There's a peaceful coexistence going on in here. But this now king of this mindset is going to let's deal wisely with them. And it comes to pass that lest they multiply, hold on to that, lest they multiply, and it comes to pass that when any war falls out, they'll join our enemies and overtake us. This is the problem with probably. This is the problem with might. Rather than go talk to them, rather than establish a positive rapport with them, he sits in his own mind and works up a situation and a scenario that he really has no idea what would happen, but rather than go and interact with them, build this positive relationship with them, he stands off to the side and comes up with his own determination of how they're going to react in a certain situation. Not only does he do that, but now all his actions are based on his probably. He's going to mistreat, he's going to enslave an entire people based on his probably. Not what he knew about them, because he didn't know anything about them. He didn't care to know anything about them. See, this, put a pin in it right here, we're going to camp here for a minute. This is what we do to people. When we assume their actions, when we don't engage them, when we don't find out what it is that they want to do, find out what it is that they're talking about, find out what it is, who they are. Find out and engage with them and try to build a positive relationship with them. And so we look at them and we assume what they're going to do. We assume what they're thinking. We read the look on their face. Oh, they don't like me. They don't like what I said. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on in them. They might be having stomach cramps at the time. But you look at them and that snarl on their face, you're like, oh, that person does not like me. That person they hate what I just said. So because of that, I'm going to do this. So the point is that we, again, engage. Don't assume. Don't think that we know everything. Don't base it. That's why Solomon in Proverbs, he wrote, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not to your own understanding. Acknowledge the Lord in all your ways and he will make your path straight. Pharaoh did not have Proverbs to go by. You didn't have that. I'll give him that. I'll give him that. But he also did not he did not engage them. He didn't try to find out anything about them. He didn't try to go say, well, if we go to war, if someone goes to war, whose side will you be on? You know, this generation, these people have prospered from being in Egypt. These people have prospered from being in peaceful coexistence with the Egyptians. But this guy rose up, and now he assumes that because they are who they are, because there's more of them than us, so if the enemy comes, they're going to join the enemy and they're going to overthrow us. If they wanted to do that, they would have done it already. And so what happens is, yes. So, therefore, verse 11, therefore, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. So, because he operated the way he did, The thing that he feared happened. Because what did it say? Verse 10, come let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. So his plan to prevent them from multiplying exacerbated the situation. His plan to stop them from multiplying caused them to multiply more. So it backfired in his own face. Yep, you got captives. Yep, you got people building their cities, but the thing that you did not want them to do, they are doing. Verse 12 again, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. Verse 13, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and brick and in all manner of service in the field, and all of their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. Put them under hard conditions, under hard circumstances, under hard situations. But in that thing, in doing that, the very thing that he did not want them to do, they did. And they did way beyond what he could have worked, his worst fears, way beyond his worst fears. And the worst part is he couldn't slow it down, he couldn't even stop them from doing it. He tried to, he wanted to. Verse 15. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other was Puah. And he said, when ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God. God's always got somebody in place. See, the plans of the enemy, they might be whoever that enemy is, it doesn't matter who that enemy is. The king of the land is calling these midwives in. These are the two chief midwives over all the other midwives. That's why he's calling them in. That's why he's telling them. And the king is giving them this order, giving this command, giving them these marching papers forward. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king called for the midwives and said unto them, why have ye done this thing? And ye have saved the men children alive. What's going on? I gave you orders, and they're still growing, and they're still multiplying. So he's got to have his eye on the situation. He's checking things out. He's looking, what is going on? There's still more coming. Because in his head, what he feared, unnecessarily, let's deal wisely with them, lest they multiply and take us over. Because he operated the way he did. The thing that his plan backfired is backfiring in his face. So why have you not? The midwives feared God, and the king called them. Verse 19. And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women. They're a little stronger. They got a little more fortitude to them. They're not like these Egyptian women, okay? So don't get mad at us. They're not like you Egyptians, okay? Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered, and the midwives come in unto them. Therefore, God dwelt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. So the very thing that he feared of them, that they might multiply, is the very thing that he caused to happen. See, God, people out there are planning things against you, planning things against us. And they're operating, they're putting all these things in place. They're doing all these things to try to stop us, to try to stop the church, to try to stop the word of God. But whatever they're trying to do to stop it is causing it to multiply. Because that's God's plan. See, it feels like something else, and it looks like something else. But it's God's plan in action. It's God's plan in action. See, God is in the process of growing the nation. He said the process of growing a nation. How do we know that? Because he promised Abraham. What he promised Abraham, that your seed is going to outnumber the sand. He's going to outnumber the stars in the sky. He will become a mighty nation. This is how God grows a nation. By having Abraham wait 25 years. This is how God grows a nation. By having Jacob trick his brother and have to flee to another land. That's how God grows a nation. By Jacob getting 2 wives and 2 handmaids. This is how God grows a nation. By having a jealous sister, the less loved sister, who bore more kids than anybody else, the less attractive one who bore more kids than anybody else. This is how God grows a nation. By taking the favored one who was barren and giving the husband one that he could love and cherish. This is how God grows a nation. By having that one favored one be separated from his family. That's how God grows a nation. By having that favored one get thrown into a pit. That's how God grows a nation. By taking him from the pit and putting him in a Potiphar's house so that he can prosper Potiphar's house. Not himself. But in his prospering Potiphar's house, he found a position of favor. But in that position of favor, somebody saw him a little too favorably. And because he would not yield to her plan, he had to go to prison, which was all part of God's plan, because that's how God grows a nation. And so, in prison, he's forgotten about, overlooked for 2 years. But that's how God grows a nation. And then finally, he gets to be before the king. And he uses the gift that God gave him, that he could not use in the pit, that he could not use in Potiphar's house, that he used in the prison to get him to the palace. That's how God grows a nation. His way and in his time. That's how God grows a nation. It's not the way man would do it. It's not the way man would do it. Man can't do it the way God does it, because the way God does it, it is unstoppable. Because the way God does it, it looks flawed, but it is flawless. Huh. So, it says, and the midwives said unto Pharaoh, these women are not like the Egyptians, for they are lively. You got them working. You got them doing all this stuff. These women are getting stronger. These women are stronger than Egyptian women. Egyptian women aren't working. They're not laboring. Like these Hebrew women. You're making some stout women out there. So we can't stop them. Not that they would if they could, because they love the Lord and they weren't going to do it. But they're telling the king that this is why. This is why. Because that's how God grows a nation. When the king's plans and plots are in place, God has somebody. God has somebody in place, because that's how God grows a nation. Verse 21, and it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. Verse 22, when Pharaoh charged all the people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. So the king turns up his plan. But that's how God grows a nation. That's how God grows a nation. Chapter 2, Exodus. Says, and there went a man of the house of Levi, and took a wife, a daughter of Levi. And when the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him, he was a goodly child, and she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took him for an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and he lay in the figs by the river's bank. And his sister stood afar off to wit that what would be done with him. Verse 5, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." Then said his daughter to Pharaoh's daughter, then said his daughter, "Shall I go?" Okay, this is how God works. This is how, see, when the enemy makes a plan to stop what God is doing, I'm going to kill all these babies. We're going to kill all these babies. And so, in the midst of all of that, because now she's fearing for the life of her son, she has him and she hides him for 3 months. And when she can't hide him anymore, she puts him in the bulrushes and puts him in the river. And the daughter follows him. And the ark makes its way to the place where Pharaoh's daughter is bathing. So, to the enemy, this is your warning. When you make plans to stop God's plans, when you make plans against God's people, he's going to bring the deliverer, and you're going to raise up. Your daughter's going to raise up the one that's going to conquer you. Your conqueror is going to come in your house and be raised by your daughter to take you out. And you're not even going to know it. She knew it was a Hebrew baby. She knew because of the swaddling clothes. She had to wrap it up in something. So Pharaoh's daughter knew. She didn't know who. She didn't know who Moses was. She didn't know any of that. She knew she found a baby. She knew she wanted a baby. She knew she was going to raise a baby. She didn't know she was raising the one who would free the ones that were now captivated in captivity. She didn't know that. But that's how God raises a nation. That's how God grows a nation. Because his plans will not be thwarted. His plan cannot be thwarted. His plan can't be outdone by the enemy. The enemy's going to look and see and have his ways that he thinks is going to stop us. But in having to work around his plans, God's going to use his plan. And it's going to be the plan that stops the enemy from doing what it is he wants to do. So for generations, they were kept in captivity. For generations, they had to cry out to God. For generations, so they still knew God. They didn't have any God experience. They didn't see great miracles of God. They still worshiped. They could not worship as a nation, but they still worshiped. They still knew who God was. There was all of that. That's how God grows a nation. In the pressure, in the hard times, in the hardship of captivity, that's how God grows a nation. Think about me in the New Testament. How did the New Testament church spread? Because of the persecution. And so they took the gospel to many lands. How did God grow a nation? By allowing them to go into captivity and get pressed by that captivity, pressed by that hard work. See, when you take a lump of something, a group of anything, and you start pressing on it, you're not crushing it into oblivion, you're spreading it out. It's growing and expanding. See, they grew and expanded under the hand that was supposed to wipe them out. They grew and expanded under the plan that was supposed to limit them and keep them in a certain boundary, because how big they were already made them scared. See, that's what happens when you operate out in fear. Your plan to get rid of the thing you're so scared of makes that thing you're scared of bigger. And it works against you. Two sides to that coin. That's a lesson for us. Trust God. Lean not to our own understanding. Because as soon as we start leaning to our own understanding, we're going to start operating in that fear. And that fear is going to tell us we got to do this to get rid of this thing. And our plan to get rid of this thing that we're not supposed to be fearing, we're going to make it bigger. And it's going to work against us. See, he had his plan of what he was going to do to God's people. He couldn't even acknowledge and say these were God's people because a Pharaoh rose up that knew not Joseph. So he did not know that these were the descendants of Joseph. He didn't know that these were descendants of God's man. God's man that sat in the number 2 seat in Egypt. So his plan to destroy them made them bigger, made them stronger. This king, his plan to stop, to kill all the males, brought the deliverer into his own house. so that within that generation, that deliverer, who he would raise up, palace, who he would raise up in royalty, who he would raise up with his own resources, would come back to set his people free. Who he thought was his people. The king who thought those were his people were God's people. See, everybody's going to have their opinion. They're going to think I own you. They're going to think you do what I say do. But in the moment, in the time when God says, oh no, it's time. When God says it's time, you're coming out of that thing. And they can say no 10 times. Just like Pharaoh did. They can say no 10 times. But know that after every no, there's a plague coming. It's going to hit them and not us. So we got to keep the faith. Don't get mad at the deliverer because things got worse when he got here. Don't get mad at him because it's God's plan. And that's how God raises a nation. That's how God grows a nation. See, when you vine growers, vineyard, people who grow grapes for wine. Those grapes have to grow in harsh conditions. They have to grow in harsh conditions so that they'll produce the right type of juice. So that when they're crushed and they'll ferment, they get the right kind of flavor by growing in those harsh conditions because it's intense. There's an intensity that those grapes now have because they're growing in those harsh conditions. But when they're crushed and then barreled and then aged properly, and then finally, when it's time, when that wine is consumed, it is some of the finest and best wine that there is. See, that's how God grows a nation. That's how God grows a nation. We have to when you look at your situation and your circumstance, don't begin to complain, because know that God is growing a nation. When it's hard, when it's difficult, when everything is coming against you, don't look to God. Don't look at God. Look to God. Call out for God, because He's growing a nation. When you think you're in bondage, when you think you're in captivity, call out to God, because He's growing a nation. He's growing a nation. No single person who went through that time was that nation. But all of those people together, going through it together, were a nation that was growing. It was being grown by God. See, man thought he was oppressing. Man thinks he's oppressing, but God is growing. Man thinks he's oppressing, but God is expanding. Man thinks he's oppressing, but God is multiplying. Man thinks he's obliterating. Man thinks he's getting rid of, but God is expanding. He's adding to. He's multiplying. He's growing. He's building. He's fortifying. God's plan over man's plan every day.
Every day.
God's plan over man's plan 24/7. God's plan over man's plan. God was growing a nation. Abraham had to wait his 25 years. Joseph had to go through everything that he went through. The children of Israel had enjoyed a time of prosperity. But the time of prosperity was greatly eclipsed by the time of captivity and bondage. But the time of captivity and bondage was growth and expansion, was God's plan, was God's time. They did not. And so much so that when they finally tasted freedom, all they knew was captivity. So at the first roadblock, they wanted to run back to the captivity because that was all they knew. That was all they knew. But God was trying to say, get to know me. He gave them 40 years in the desert to say, get to know me. Get to know me. Rely on me. Let me be the default. See, he took the nation out of Israel, out of Egypt, but he couldn't, but the nation wouldn't let Israel, Egypt, be taken out of them. See, God could take them out of Egypt, but they wouldn't let Egypt be taken out of them. They held on to Egypt instead of holding on to God. And that generation that was born in the desert, that knew not captivity. See, a Pharaoh arose who knew Joseph. So he conducted himself as he did not know Joseph. There was a nation, there was a generation that was born in the desert that knew not captivity. So they didn't want to revert back to captivity. The generation that was born in captivity, when they tasted freedom, captivity was the default. So that generation that was born in freedom they didn't want to go back to this thing that they had not experienced because it didn't sound good. They heard them talking about it. I remember back when we used to be oppressed. I remember back when, and they're talking about it in ways that they're bemoaning. They're looking back on Egypt the way Lot's wife looked at Sodom and Gomorrah. The place that they've been liberated from, the place that they've been saved from, they're looking back longing. See, if you look back to learn. Don't look back and yearn. Because you're anchoring yourself to that place. Let it go. You get to where God has got for you. See that generation, that generation born that was not born in captivity? That generation that knew not the sting of a whip, the generation that knew not the labor of gathering your own straw to build bricks, to build somebody else's city, that knew not that was not their default. Their default was, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? See, the captivity generation was, can we go back yet? Can we go back yet? Because everything that came up was, can we go back? We're going back. We're going back. You have been a generation in captivity. Moses was on the mountain for 40 days. 40 days! You're more than 40 days old. You spent your life in captivity, and you can't wait 40 days for Moses to come back? Oh, we're going back. We're going back. We're going back. God should have said, you're all gone. Go on, man. Go on, man. But that would have been a bad look. That would have been a bad look. But that's how God grows the nation. That's how God grows the nation. Because the lineage from Adam, Abraham, up to Joseph, that singular line. But when it came from Joseph, it felt like that singular line. But Joseph and his brothers, they were the sons of Jacob. They became the children of Israel, which became the nation of Israel. And we can read through here, and we can see more adversity than prosperity, than what the world calls prosperity. We see more adversity than we see times of peace. But in those times of adversity, those were times where God was growing the nation. Times of bondage, times of captivity, God was growing the nation. That's how God grows a nation. Even today, like today, guess what? God is growing a nation. He's growing a nation. We don't like where everybody else is. We know some are shaking off of that. But guess what? God is growing a nation. He's growing a nation. We have grown here today. The nation that God is building has grown today. It has grown today. God is growing a nation. And if that we have a title for today's message, that will be it, how God grows a nation. Amen? Amen. Amen. Come on, give God some praise today.
Amen.
Amen. He is good.